Hi, everyone. I'm David Lipton from The Reckoning, July 4th, 2030. Welcome to our fourth in a series of weekly podcasts. This episode is about blaming someone else for our political problems. I know I promised in our last podcast to reflect on a memorable line from William Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. Well, here it is. Quote, "The fault lies neither in the stars nor our politicians, but in ourselves." End of quote. Okay, Cassius did not really say that. He said, "The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves." End of quote. Shakespeare talked about the stars, not politicians, as they did not exist in his day. There was Queen Elizabeth I, various factions at her court, everyone else just toed the line, or else. Of course, today we would say that people conformed to and followed current ideas and behavior. Whose ideas and behavior are we following? Here's the rub. In a democracy such as ours, it is ourselves, collectively speaking. We really don't have to go back as far as Shakespeare for a lesson in finger pointing. The 1920s will do nicely. H. L. Mencken was one of the premier literary critics of those years, and his commentaries were directed at, well, just about everyone. The one that applies directly to our time is about democracy. Quote, "Democracy is the theory that the common people know what they want and deserve to get it, good and hard." End of quote. Let's start with one of those stubborn things called facts. The broadest ongoing statistical measure of our democracy on the national level is the political division of the House of Representatives. Currently, as of December 2023, there are 221 seats held by the Republicans and 213 by the Democrats. The Democrats have about 197 safe seats, and the Republicans have only 20 such seats. Safe seats are the rock-solid number that each party can count on, regardless of what happens at large in the country. The important points to recognize are that the Democrats have 10 times as many safe seats as do the Republicans, and half of the seats are rarely ever competitive. Aside from the occasional landslide election, one of the regrettable conclusions from this hardcore division is that half of the representatives have not the slightest interest in listening to the arguments of those that disagree with them. All they want to do is put forward the programs that they favor and get everyone else to vote for them. If we add to the above numbers the fact that 80 to 85% of the electorate consistently divides between the Democratic and Republican parties, it is easy to point fingers at the other party. The enduring political division between red and blue voting patterns is dramatically illustrated in the accompanying charts showing presidential voting results back to the 19th century. Most of us vote consistently for either one party or the other. Nevertheless, from Franklin Delano Roosevelt onwards, the almost even divide is clear and enduring. Let's shift our attention from who we are voting for to what we are voting for. I suggest an exercise to my listeners. Use your favorite search engine or AI GPT chat line to describe how the Democrats and Republicans differ from each other. Limit your query to 1,000 words or less. What will you find? Here's what I found. First place on the list describing each party was the fundamental difference between the two parties was their respective attitudes towards the government and its role in our society. In other words, it was a vision of government and society that separates one party from the other. This is why political dialogue has become so bitter, because each side knows that the other party has not the slightest interest in what they believe and what they advocate. The larger national interest is simply ignored. In a short podcast, it is difficult to go in depth into controversial subjects such as ideological differences between political visions. For a wide-ranging analysis of this highly charged issue of political visions, I recommend a book written by Thomas Sowell, A Conflict of Visions. Patience when reading it, please. It is a thoughtful description of a complicated subject and should be digested slowly. The Democrats want a larger role of government in regulating, note that word, regulating, the economic and social activities of our nation, and the Republicans want a smaller and more limited role of government in interfering, notice the word, for interfering in our economic and social interactions. All the other differences on issues like social welfare, gun control, immigration, environmental concerns, foreign affairs, and so forth are extensions of their respective visions of America. Please note the difference in the verbs I use to describe what each party believes. Often fervently it is doing. What the Democrats see as regulating our individual and social affairs, the Republicans see them as interfering into them. It's the old attitude of, don't tread on me. And that attitude goes way back to the founding of our republic. Well, what do you think? I have much more to say about this issue in another podcast. To return to our larger point, it all boils down to which vision our country that we prefer and defend vigorously. We might call it, as Sowell did, a conflict of visions. Recalling numbers and trends from the early episodes covering the last 50 years, it is obvious that all presidents collectively spend more tax money at a rate that exceeds our economic rate of growth. The net result of that is that we have created, regardless of which party is in power, over 3 times as much debt for every dollar of economic production over those years. Well, I know I'm sort of repeating myself here, but I really want people to get their heads around that ratio of 3-to-1 debt creation to every dollar of value that we produce and consume. Now, where did that money come from? It came from the future. That is what debt is all about. We use borrowing from the future, that is debt, to pay for many of the things we want now that we cannot really afford. Good things like Social Security benefits, government services, consumer goods, etc. To drive home the point, it is my generation, the boomer generation, that is largely responsible for authorizing to ever higher levels of government spending that we could hope to pay for. Yes, we are a large part of the problem. Ever since the 1970s, with the accelerated social spending of the Great Society programs, we have never really looked back to what all that spending would entail. The intended consequences were towards social justice and fairness. What are the unintended consequences? Did it really work out as we thought it would? That discussion is for a whole nother episode. You may also recall that the half-century declines in our national productivity rate started in the 1970s, from a 2.8% annual growth rate to a near zero rate in 2020. Ask yourselves, are the two related or simply coincidental? So let's answer the question of who is to blame and what do we really want from ourselves and our government. Well, we have met the culprit, and it's all of us. There is no use blaming politicians who just want to get elected and reelected while they tell us what we want to hear and what we want to have and to consume. As you can see, the American people in the last half century knew what they wanted and they got it good and hard. No need to worry. Since we know who is partially responsible, we can start knocking on doors to find a solution to the problem of chronic overspending. However, I do suggest that before going out the door, we might look in the mirror first. Time to go. You will hear from me, David Lipton, in a week's time when we reflect on how and why changes in our political thinking that are necessary if we are to overcome our collective national vice of overspending. You can access my ideas and thoughts by visiting Amazon.com and search for The Reckoning, July 4th, 2030.